Welcome to my new development sales gallery. There is one person in my company who really gets the art and the science of closing and negotiation more than anyone else, and that is my director of new development, Jennifer Elise. It's Jennifer's job to get massive real estate projects like this one right here with multiple hundreds of millions of dollars in sellout. And I always say, control the inventory, control the income. And there's no better way to control the inventory than to get a whole building full of inventory. Hundreds of units, each selling for multiple millions of dollars. And the developer, who's our client for a building like this, is trusting us with not only hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, but also on the timeline for selling out those hundreds of millions of dollars. Because you know what? The developer needs to sell on time because he or she has hundreds of millions of dollars in construction loans to pay back to the bank. So there's really a clock ticking here. And who do I trust to get this right through closing and negotiation of these massive properties? Jennifer Elise. Jen?
Hi.
Hello, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, Jen and I met at a new development launch party I was doing,
Village.
right? Yeah, on 7th Street.
Yep.
Yes. And Jen worked...
No, 13th Street.
Yes. See, thank you so much for being here. Too many properties I don't remember. So I met you at that party, and this was 8 years ago?
At least, yeah.
Why were you there?
My friend brought me to the party because it was an art battle show, and we were both really into art.
Right, because we were selling these 2 new development buildings before we actually did the demolition to them.
So you spray painted both facades.
Yeah, so I got 2 graffiti artists to come and we were gonna do this whole art battle and then the audience was gonna vote and it was a way to drum up interest before we even put the units on the market.
And to get people there that normally would not have come to a new development.
Like you!
Yeah.
Who worked in boring title insurance.
It wasn't that boring.
It was a little boring. I mean, compared to sales, negotiating, right?
Yes.
Making commissions. How were you paid when you were in title?
Very little.
See, I'm a pretty good judge of talent. I just want to put that out there. And though Jen was doing something so boring.
It wasn't that boring.
I knew that she was a killer. And I was right. She is the expert,
Thank you.
honestly, when it comes to reading people, negotiating with them, and ultimately closing them. Jen is going to take you through the next few chapters. But first, Jen, I actually have a few questions for you.
Go for it.
What is your big secret to negotiation?
Well, basically a deal's like a puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? The deal is the puzzle, right? And you need to figure out what you want out of it, what the client wants out of it, and you have to visualize where you're getting to. Like we all did puzzles during COVID, remember that? We were all sitting there and you had the box and it was ready to go. And some people would have simple puzzles and some people would have big complex puzzles, but the way you put the puzzle together never changes. Whether you have 10 pieces or you have 2,000 pieces, you know where you're trying to get to and you're trying to stick it all together so that it's perfect. And at any given moment, that's what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to read the buyer, I'm trying to read the seller, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how am I gonna get that piece here because I know I have to get that done because I gotta get us to the finish line. How am I gonna get that piece over here? And over time, you stitch it all together to that perfect picture, which is a done deal, right?
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so how do you figure out what everyone actually wants in that puzzle?
Well, that's why we're all here. I mean, I have a few go-to conversations, particularly with my own client, whether I'm representing the buyer or the seller. I ask them why they're buying or selling. Remember, selling is a series of asking questions, right? If you remember from our core course, the original course, you want to be able to speak and listen to respond, not just to reply. So why are you buying or selling? Sometimes you think it's for one reason, but it's actually for something totally different when you really get into it. What are their plans, right? After the transaction is done, and so on and so forth. You really want to be their friend and ask them those questions. But the kicker is that no one is going to tell you everything. So my job, your job, our job as expert closers and negotiators is to look beyond what anyone is telling me, you know? And you're pretty great at that. Someone could tell you to your face, oh, I want to sell because I want to move uptown. But the real reason might be, he's the only one talking as we're sitting with Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Seems like this relationship's not working out and he needs to move out. That might be the real reason. There's different motives there. They're never gonna tell you until you get more comfortable with them down the line.
Let me give you some examples. And you too. Let's talk about timeline. If I know a seller already bought a home, it doesn't matter how long they can hold both properties, they want to sell.
Exactly. Never let any seller tell you they don't. Sure, the seller wants to get the best price that they can, but that doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all, right? There are always going to be factors outside of the money, and those are often the things that get the deal closed. So like you said, push timeline.
How about money? Everybody has a money objection.
Yes, there is sometimes a real budget objection, but the real answer to someone's wants go way beyond the money. And that's always the thing that I focus on figuring out. Getting there is a combination of knowing what questions to ask and being able to read between the lines of what people are telling you.
For example, Ryan, you'll remember the Tribeca deal we just did.
That's a great example, actually. We have this apartment in Tribeca where the sellers paid 8.4. We're representing the sellers, and we convinced them, took a long time to get it listed at 8. So at 8 million plus all the closing costs, they're already going to lose a bunch of money. And they made it about the money to start. That's it, we're gonna price it at 8, that's gotta sell, that's why we hired you. We might negotiate a little bit, but what did we know? We knew that they already moved out.
Right.
They're not here, it's an empty apartment, it needs to be renovated. We hope we can get 8, but we also know that the key item for them in this sale is getting it sold and moving on. So when we finally started to get offers in the high $6 million range, which was really, really far away, they got angry, they were mean, absolutely not. We stayed consistent. If you remember from the original course, push, pull, persist, we stayed persistent, we stayed on them. And because it wasn't just about the money, like they said, we made it about the end game, which was selling this big apartment in Tribeca that they're paying for every month that they just don't need. And we got the deal done at what price?
6.9.
Exactly, 6.9. Now, it's not the best situation for the seller because just on the price alone, they're taking a $1.5 million loss. And then they have our brokerage commissions, they have the New York City transfer taxes, and so many other things. So what was the goal?
To sell the apartment.
Exactly. They made it about the money, but because we are expert closers and negotiators, we knew it wasn't about the money. It was about the outcome in this case, which was actually selling the home and removing the monthly carrying cost from an empty home they just weren't using anymore. And in the long game, did these people, who are pretty wealthy, really care if they sold it for 8 or 7 or 6.9 or whatever it was going to be? No. Because they're going to take the loss and they're going to write it down for a long time and move on. And the mental freedom that they're going to have of not thinking about this asset anymore is worth a lot of money to some people. But that's just a specific example of how people will make it about the money and about the budget, but it's your job to read through the lines and understand what it's really about. So we have timeline, we now have money, or rather the need or motivation that's under the money. And then once you figured out what it is that everyone wants, how do you use that to your advantage to actually get a deal done?
That part is all about keeping control.
Yes, you want to be the person who is always in control of the situation. You're in control of that puzzle. No one else is coming in and messing up your pieces. You have it under control. And that takes consideration of a few things. First, timing and process are the biggest. I think successful negotiation is more about process than it is about the stuff, right? And you could have a million concessions up your sleeve should you need to present them to get a deal done. But if you put everything on the table from the get-go, you lose control of the process and then you have no cards left to play. It's like taking all the puzzle pieces and scattering them all over the place and then inviting everyone else in to pay. Like, it's just gonna be a mess. Keep it simple. And next up, Jen is gonna give us a masterclass in playing for the other side to win.